and needs to present plans in good faith.
I mean, the contours of this project, again, are just to remove the buildings and establish green space. I'm not sure if I understand your question. I'm trying.
Well, it's clearly an attempt at that, building is gonna be built there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I
Well,
think that's
it's
up to the
in
end.
report. So you should know.
I think they're considering building. It's not in my report that they're going to build, but I understand your question.
Oh, it says in your report.
It's a two-piece review. And this isn't uncommon. Piece one is to remove the buildings. That gets reviewed. I think everybody understands, and it's stated in the report, as you said, that construction is probably forthcoming there. But the second piece would be that construction would need to be reviewed again through this process. So I don't think there was any concern that the wool's being pulled over anyone's eyes, because there has to be that follow-up review.
Well, there was a concern in the community, because I circulated a petition with exactly this concern, that people wanted to see these plans for the future construction. They wanted to know how this was going to be handled so that we could see how the new building is going to affect the surrounding area.
I understand what you're saying now. Yeah,
If I could respond to it as well for the commission. So, what's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, someone was going to rebuild, but I don't think it was an intention that you are going to rebuild. I interpreted that you had to present your plans. Our plans were to turn it into green space, and so I felt like we satisfied that requirement. I would love to have a project to present. I think it tells a better story of what the intention is. But I'm honest and sincere in saying that there is no plan to build. There's an acknowledgement that there will be a building at one point, but know that there is a process, our local permitting process, the Act 250 process, that has to go through to actually determine what would go in that space.
Yes, sir.
Section 402 of the 405, I'm sorry, of the Village of Woodstock current zoning ordinance, not one that you're looking to change right now in your role on the Town Planning Commission. Item G2, before a building, structure, or site is demolished or moved, the applicant shall, in good faith, prepare a detailed plan for the reuse of the vacated site for use by the Design Review Board, which I formerly chaired and we never saw, to determine whether the proposal will meet the criteria established in the above the referencing. And then it goes on to say, later, under 5, structures on or eligible for the National Register of Historic Places may be demolished only if the Village Design Review Board finds all of the following standards are met. The structure cannot be rehabilitated or reused on site as part of any economically beneficial use of the property. I don't believe that. I know that's what's been testified this morning. The structure proposed for demolition is structurally unsound despite efforts by the owner to maintain the property. That's not true. Most of us toured the building and its overall structure is certainly salvageable. It's dry. The third, item C, structure cannot be reasonably moved to another site. I would argue there wasn't a lot of effort put into that endeavor. A month is nothing when you're advertising for something of this complexity. If it was an honest, genuine intent, they would have alerted the review bodies. This is going to be happening over the next 6 months as a process, so we could be of assistance. Demolition proposal mitigates to the greatest extent practical any impact to the character of the neighborhood of the property on which the demolition is proposed to occur. We're all sitting here because we do feel it's going to have a very severe adverse impact. And I also want to mention this whole notion of mothballing is really interesting because the National Park Service defined this 30 years ago in their NPS field guide. And they missed 2 steps. Before you start mothballing, you document, which the state asked them to do photographically, architecturally. You stabilize structurally so that you've got a safe, sound building. Then you mothball. Then you might look plywood on the windows. Then you might make an announcement, don't go near this property, it's out of bounds. They didn't do any of that. I also want to correct his testimony. The historic district, by definition, all buildings are historic. There are no non-historic buildings. There are contributing buildings and there are non-contributory buildings. Every one of the ends properties that I know of in there are contributory. So that's just a misnomer. There are all historic buildings within the district. And the costs shown in the report are clearly stated by your firm, Scott, that they're commercial costs. So don't say now that they're residential and it would be more if it was commercial. I quote on what page of your, I was just looking at it during your testimony, page 13, 16 South Street. We note that the building structure was evaluated for residential occupancy and the required load ratings for commercial property can be twice those levels depending on the type of business.
Mhm.
With residential use all but eliminated, in other words, we're now into commercial from consideration, the poor structural conditions at 16 South would be considerably more expensive to remediate for commercial occupancy. Then they go on and list the various prices, 3.2 million. I'm sure there's contractors in the audience who could say otherwise. I'm not questioning that you didn't go through this drill, but my feeling is it was all that was a drill.
Okay,
If I
yes, we'll let you speak.
I mean, if I could, we have our structural engineer that we hired to do the 2019 study, and we have our architect that we've used on record for decades with much experience. And if you want to hear testimony from them as far as the validity of those estimates or the validity of those structural defects, have to have them address that formally to the commission as well.
Perhaps the commission would like to see it.
I would
Another
ask if
report.
they do. I would ask if they do. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
like to hear, they're here. I'd like to have their testimony. This, I think, is a relevant time to do it.
Anyone?
Let's do the questions and then we'll go back.
Yes.
So we had a couple other hands.
We
up,
have a
so.
new gentleman that has not spoken yet. You, sir.
It has to do with appropriate, not rehabilitation, but maintenance. Living in Vermont, isn't maintaining a heating system required maintenance? Or was that exempt from this property because the inn had already stopped maintaining the heating source in 2004, and the first proposal of this series happened in 2009.
I think we have letter documentation that shows correspondence with Department of Historic Preservation that they have acknowledged that there is no heating system. So I think it's perfectly reasonable that there was no expectation that the inn would repair the heating system for these buildings in the process of keeping the buildings unoccupied. And was there a second part of the question? I had that in my mind. What was this? Was there not more to that question?
I mean, the inn owned the properties and they stopped maintaining them, but they stopped maintaining them before this Act 250 process started in 2009.
Yeah, well,
You know, I'm just wondering, because they had already stopped maintaining, does that mean they did not have to put in a heating system? Because that just strikes me as negligence.
I mean, again, I think it was clear that they were unheated and that putting in a heating system was not a part of the condition. I know that both buildings got vacated at 2004, 2005. I don't know the extent of the repairs that were done between 2005 and 2009 when the original permit was.
I think owned these buildings way before that.
Right, and they were used as employee housing and occupied.
Jenna has her.
Yeah, I think we talked about that so that everyone has an understanding of the date, the timelines, and your thoughts about the upkeep for heating. Jenna, you have a comment or a question?
Scott, you have an enormous amount of experience working in the field of preservation, 15 years working for the state, you know, putting that regulatory hat back on. when something like demolition is on the table, it's not uncommon to expect a second opinion on a structural report or, feasibility studies or those types of, things, right?
In some circumstances, it's warranted, sure.
Would it feel reasonable in this situation, given that there's clearly a lot of concerns about this, to have another opinion come in? I think the architect and the engineer involved in this project have given sound recommendations, but much like we would Preservation Trust of Vermont, when we're talking about demolition, replacement, you always want to have a second opinion to kind of reaffirm that the decision you're making is based on kind of the broad opinion on the subject.
That's a good question, Jen. I mean, John and Steve are like, highly experienced, highly accredited professionals. I've read the reports. Nothing in those reports struck me that it needed to be looked at again. Don't know if that answers your question, but I think the inn has done its due diligence. In this case, it spent a lot of time, quite frankly, a fair bit of its resources evaluating these buildings, and I think hired really highly qualified people to look at them. I mean, they're going to come up and testify, so maybe that's a good question for John or Steve.
But thinking more of the information you look for before approving a demolition, do you think a second opinion is valid when considering a very final?
Yeah, on what specifically? I mean, on the engineering report?
Well, no, on the whole, thinking about the architecture, the engineering, Messier's is a very well-respected, building moving company. There's just clearly a lot of questions that the community has, and would that be a way for the inn to kind of help alleviate some of that?
You understand? I mean, in this case, you'll have three opinions, right? You'll have mine, then you'll have the SHPO's, and then you'll have the commission. So you've got three sets of eyes. That's a pretty, I think, comprehensive gauntlet for this to go through before a decision is made. DRB. And the DRB, zoning regulations. I mean, a lot of people have looked at this project.
Okay.
Two more questions, and then they want to put in experts.
Okay,
Let's try to keep them.
Yes.
Try to keep them.
Let's, yes, we've got to move on. You said.
So I just had a question back to the cost issue. So are these estimates of nearly 3 million and just over 3 million, are these to commercial standards or residential standards?
I believe they're residential standards, and the notation that was referred to earlier was my explaining that they would be higher for commercial, not saying that they were commercial.
Because as I remember when Ben testified locally, he testified it was the commercial standard.
Yeah.
There was a clarification about misunderstanding how they were being used, because if they're used for a commercial use, which is for us renting out the structures as guest rooms is a commercial use. That's not the same from a building standard point, and Stephen can speak to this. There are cases where that use, which again to me as in hospitality is a commercial use, still can qualify as a residential standard. So in that meeting, I think it was a miscommunication about how people were understanding what commercial use was, residential use versus
what
code use.
What is the actual use? Is it for guest rooms? This $3 million estimate?
That is for guest rooms.
Okay, so that's technically not residential use.
Code wise,
That's commercial use, and you would have to reinforce and build things strong.
yeah, I'll get Steve to weigh in on that, because he has the expertise.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
pardon me, but I can't imagine having to spend on my house $3 million to renovate it.
Okay.
I didn't even come close to that, so.
Okay, did you have a question, ma'am?
I do. My question is about, it's back to the permit application for green space. And the point you made, we're separating two steps that are actually connected. So the background on this and my concern here is that the village doesn't need green space. No one's clamoring for green space. in this beautiful area. It's not a game, but the point is, that's what the permit is being asked for. But behind the scenes, which everyone is admitting, these things are going on. This is land, they have no use for buildings. This is land that's only useful for expansion. The green space is like a camouflage. And and one of the reasons that many people are concerned about that is that the next phase of this is after we've lost what we've lost. And part of this equation is, what do we lose? What are the adverse effects of what we gain? You know, where's the balance here? Because nobody's in this room is talking about how great it is we're going to have green space, right? That's not the goal here. And I think that the other backstory that's going on here that's relevant is that there's a lot of revision in the works for permitting. It's at the state level. We have the regional use map being revisited. Our current planning commission, which I hope Ben has shared with you, he sits on, is rewriting our zoning regulations to be more adaptive to increasing housing availability. So housing is the #1 goal. And on top of that, we're going to do the town plan again. So, and this is driven by the state. So by separating these two permits that ultimately are going to result in a construction of an expansion, we're going to be working under new rules. I'm bringing this up because I feel like this green
Yes.
space is buying time for what?
Yeah, you have a question in?
Yes, it's a question, how can you really justify separating these two applications and putting green space in the middle of it is really the concern.
Yeah,
Go
I mean,
ahead.
I thought I've answered it already in that we're at an inflection point where continuing to maintain the buildings for future use is not sustainable. Again, I would love to have a plan to show of what we're going to do with the space. I know there are processes in place, Act 250, local permitting, discussing with neighbors what that future use is. We don't have a future use in plan, and I'm not making the argument we need green space. I'm not making an argument that we're all better off for green space. I am acknowledging that there is future use and viability in the land. I'm not sure where the camouflage is coming from, because I feel like I'm putting everything on the table. We're putting everything out there of what that is.
I guess the gap for me is we can't really determine adverse effect without knowing the full outcome of undue adverse effect.
Correct. You can
It's separate.
Okay.
We're separating.
Yeah,
That's
they are,
part of the, yeah.
they are presenting from what they have.
Right, I understand, I'm
Let's
sorry.
move
Okay.
Because of the point
Okay.
made that we are separating the permits. That's
Okay,
I'm
now,
so sorry.
okay, yes. Now, we had some experts that you would like to,
Yeah, if we could switch with John and Stephen and just talk a little bit about the structural survey that was done and address any concerns about estimates or use of the buildings.
Ben, you want to stay up there?
Yeah, I can stay up there.
I feel like we should just get an extra chair.
Yep.
You're able to
Just-
contribute.
Yeah, feel free to grab another chair.
yeah, there's one right here too.
Weird standing over people.
Yeah. So Ben, would you
Yeah, so
introduce these
I'll
fellows?
introduce, this is John Higgins, from Artisan Engineering, and Stephen Smith from SAS Architects, both are up, Burlington. Again, Stephen has worked with us for, I think, 40 years, 30 years.
Close to 40.
Close to 40 years. He's worked with Billings Farm and the National Park. Arguably, you probably have done more fun projects with the National Park and Billings than with the resort. Stephen, I think I've used up my capital with Stephen as far as investigating projects, because speculations of what can be built and what we can do. But again, very trusted resource for us from his knowledge of local building expertise, the climate that we exist in, from a construction standpoint, the
Mhm.
realities of, and feasibility of projects going forward. So again, this, process really kind of began with Stephen, he did the surveys in 2019 and brought in John, and did the environmental assessments. Stephen was also the initial connection with Scott, who, again, Department of Historic Preservation even recommended, or not recommended, but when I mentioned Scott's name, acknowledged that Scott was a good person to bring on with this kind of scope of project. So maybe I'll start off with John, if you just want to kind of talk about the structural components of the building.
So in 2019,
I'm sorry, John, do you want to just introduce yourself and your
sorry.
expertise and?
John Higgins, I own Artisan Engineering. I'm a licensed engineer in the state of Vermont for 28 years now. I've done a handful of projects for the inn. I did the spa. I've done a bunch of the buildings right here on the green, a bunch of the residential renovation that's happened. My firm does 30 or 40 houses a year. So I'm a structural engineer. I came down, Steve invited me to come down and take a walk through both structures, take some basic dimensions, take a look at what the joist framing were, and give a general assessment for what would be the feasibility to renovate these and bring them up to current code. So I developed a report, starting at the top from the roof down to the foundation. Typically, to summarize both buildings, the joists, as we often find in historic structures, are pretty good. You know, the main framing joists are okay, but when the loads back in the old days, when they built things up, as you got to the beam, what worked, but it didn't meet by the numbers. So as those loads gather, we find oftentimes the beams are undersized. And this is the case for both 14 and 16. Roof framing is generally okay in 14, the tall hip one, but the hip beams are all undersized. There's even some rafters that have been cut out from the windows. That's the way they were when they were built. Just the way it was. So those things need to be repaired at some point to move forward and get a new CO. They've been vacant for 20 years to move forward with the project. A number of the beams, same scenario. You can see where columns have actually pushed into the wood beams over the years. Things are overloaded. And then there's one foundation that's rubble, open rubble, where the water just washes in. And that was the building that I recommended be jacked up and have a new foundation put under it.
And John, you looked at these for residential use.
Yes, I use residential loads. So, you know, basic residential loading, which would work for guest rooms or.
But not for commercial.
Right, but not for a commercial restaurant or a shop on the first floor.
Or assembly use.
Yeah. I walked through them again this morning with you. There's not a lot of difference between 2019 and today in the conditions. The beams don't change size over time. They're the same size that were there when they were built as when I looked at it.
Does anyone have any photographs of the interior or exterior of those buildings in 2019? By any chance as a
We
reference?
probably do.
You
Yeah,
probably do.
I can get those to send them to Pete.
Yeah, well, they're in one of the reports.
Oh,
They're in
I'm
the,
sorry.
Okay.
we may have them,
Yeah, like.
but yeah, if you have
The
additional ones,
structural,
when the time comes to do,
Yeah, so my
something.
structural report
You
has a
could-
few pictures in there.
Yes, I did see
I
that.
think there
Yeah.
are some
You
pictures
do
of the
have-
interior. Those are from, those reports, are they from 2019? or-
These are, this
I'm not
is
sure, actually.
engineer, this is dated March 19th, 2019.
Yes, those
And
are the ones.
This is your report from
Yep.
that time. Okay, yeah, I've looked at this. I'm not sure why I didn't remember it. Okay, thank you. Okay,
I think one thing I want to point out is that, my understanding is in 2009, when there was a recommendation, or a thought process that there was a future use of these buildings, that they weren't unsound. I didn't find any evidence of, a surveying being done in 2009 as far as the structural capacities, what the conditions are in, as far as, what the conditions were in when they mothballed them. And
Excuse me? You
John,
were supposed to do that. That's what's in the agreement with the state.
I think that was for the Paul House. I don't understand the
I'll be
condition about.
happy to reread it to you from your section 106 consultant. The letter clearly spells that out. This is a responsibility you abrogate.
Yeah, I don't see that in the Act 250 permit about documenting the buildings in 2009, so, but
It was in the conclusions and decisions.
The state repeated the letters I read this morning.
Okay,
We are all in the loop, are we not?
Let's try to get through here in an orderly
Yes.
fashion, so let's,
yeah,
we're just, I'm not trying to cut you off, I'm just saying, let's let them finish. Then we'll have questions and we'll have an opportunity for additional arguments.
If the inn had said to you, we really want to reuse this, can we do it with this building? What would you answer?
I read the same report. The report is you need to do these following things.
Thank you.
Fix the foundation, fix the roof, fix the beams.
Sure.
It was a scope list
Same
of things
advice
to
you
be
gave in
included in an
2019.
estimate.
I just want to ask a clarification. So there are structural deficiencies. Are the buildings structurally unsound?
They are not going to fall down under their own weight, but you couldn't get a CO the way the buildings are now.
go on with you, sir.
Okay, my name is Steve Smith. I'm founding partner of SAS Architects in Burlington. And we do primarily public buildings throughout the state. Preservation has turned into a portion of that. We've done all the work at Shelburne Farms, for instance, for the last 25 years. And a lot of the work at the visitor center at Billings Farm, Barn 4 restoration, master plan. And then we do all the work at the national park now, which started back in the day with Lawrence. So we've seen a lot. We did, our involvement on this project came in 2018 and 19, where the inn asked us to study the feasibility of converting the beach house into inn housing and a small conference area. So we went through, we in terms of documentation, at that time, we did field measure and document the building, produced existing conditions drawings, and then we did some conceptual design studies and investigation, like from John and hazardous materials, and gave that set of schematic design drawings to HP Cummins, a general contractor, excellent. They're across the border in New Hampshire, and the inn, and I have worked with them separately for years. They came back with a number, and for the beach house, it was $1.43 million. So when Ben contacted and was looking for an updated price, we talked to our longtime cost estimator, and he said over Vermont, costs have construction costs, not consumer price index, have appreciated 6 to 7% per year since 2019. So we used a number of 6% escalation cost, and that came up with a construction cost of 2.150, which works out, when you divide it by the area of the beach house, works out to about $750 a square foot. It's a crazy amount of money still, but we're typically in our practice seeing costs of between $400 and $1,200 a square foot. So it's right in the middle of that range. For the high-end finishes, new heating system, we typically recommend geothermal systems these days. They're carbon neutral and higher initial cost, but lower cost by far over the lifespan. So that number came from HP Cummins, and the escalation cost came from our cost estimator, professional cost estimator. And then we simply, 16 South is in a similar condition, so order of magnitude, we took that same cost per square foot and applied it to 16 South. And there's it's important to note there's a difference between construction cost and then the total budget. We estimated soft costs. So they would include things like Act 250 permit fees, commissioning, architectural engineering fees, construction permit fees, and the big number in this building would be fixtures, furnishings, and equipment, if you're gonna furnish it the way that Ann had in mind.
Mhm.
It is a residential use, in answer to the comment that it wasn't. The code classifies it as residential, and there would be an increase in cost and complexity if you went to a so-called commercial use. The floor loadings would change. So that would mean every joist in there would also have to be reinforced in addition to the beams. And pretty common to find these older houses undersized according to current code. I mean, I would say it's more typical than not. So.
Okay. We've heard a lot from everyone. Before we move on to a different criteria, maybe we've overlapped some. Does anyone have anything new to add?
Is this our only opportunity, is a question, to talk about section 8, historic? In other words, criterion 8, I'm sorry. Criterion 8.
We're not gonna close you right down, but it overlaps into another criteria.
So, I guess the point is I have comments to share about these properties with respect to the historic nature. Is this the time?
Yes, it
It's
is.
not a question for any of them.
Okay,
Okay, yeah.
yes,
So in other words, we still have any testimony on criterion 8?
yes, we are.
Okay. So,
So go ahead.
okay, thank you. Okay, so I appreciate all of your perspectives and offering and from your expertise. My area of interest, as I said earlier, I own an old property. I willfully purchased an 1860s revival farmhouse with an attached barn and have willingly and joyfully maintained it and upgraded it to the specs of a family living there. Within our historic district, in the village. I'm interested in the history of Woodstock, and I joined the village. I was appointed by our trustees as a village historic preservation commissioner because of my interest in civic involvement in the community. It overlaps with my interest in zoning regulations. My degree, I have a Bachelor of Arts in visual arts, I'm a painter. So my orientation is visual, that's my background. So I have taken the time to do a deep dive on these properties. I think we can all agree, and Scott, that the National Register descriptors are cursory, they're guesstimates. The people that put time into those are doing a lot of work. So there's finer details that take deeper digging to fully understand the properties at hand. And I've spent a lot of time in our local land use records in the town clerk's office to best understand these properties. I wanted to know when number 16 was built, for example. Circa 1840 didn't sink in. So I went through all the deeds and of all the owners and read all the descriptions of the property. And I'm able to say definitively, the house was built in 1832 by Hugh Tomb, T-O-M-B. And so that to me is a relevant piece of information because we know how old it is and it's still standing. What I also can say is that there's been very little change. Its integrity is intact. This particular historic home as a contributing resource represents a period of building, and it has stayed as much that way as compared to many. Okay, so it has retained its integrity for us to recognize that Vermont farmhouse in our village. Now, where it sits predates Cross Street. It was built to face South Street. It was built as one of the first two dwellings along South Street in that neighborhood after the tavern, which I'll mention in a minute. So when you look at, when we saw the house, its front porch is on South Street. It was said to us, it's set back from Cross Street. Well, Cross Street didn't exist. It wasn't intended to be set back from Cross Street. So what we have in this building is the remaining original dwelling on that entire block that speaks to a time when Woodstock started its hospitality industry. So the Richardson Tavern, which you've heard mentioned, was all of the buildings were on the edge of the block. They were all on the street. Richardson Tavern predates the Eagle Inn, which then became the Woodstock Resort Corporation, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Woodstock in for the Eagle Hotel, yeah.
So the point is there were other buildings that were dismantled along the streetscape. And as was mentioned earlier, one of the original two dwellings disappeared. I don't know the story behind it when the tavern was built. And then the second property, 14, really dates into the before the turn of the century. It's not a 1905 structure. I've been reading the land deed records. It's infill. It represents infill. It went in between two dwellings. So what we have is the last remaining piece of that story. So number 16 is the only structure that establishes the streetscape we had. Looking down what 106 South Street was called the South Parish Highway. It was the way you went to South Woodstock. It is still the way you go to South Woodstock. But that line, which I pointed out, and I have a photo of, because it's not, that perspective isn't in any of the photos that have been submitted. In my packet, I submitted it. The front porch sits on the original streetscape of the original village. So to me, taking that down is a loss. For me, interpreting what was is a loss, an adverse effect to the historical quality of what this house is saying to us and why it's there. I mean, never mind who it housed, but just architecturally. I mean, and it housed people who made Woodstock run and work and function. So they were contributing people too. So your origins of this neighborhood that we walked was, homesteading. And then the Richardson Tavern, in, I think it's 1797 or such, was the first hospitality location. So over time, when you look at that overview map, starting in 1969, when the inn relocated, it went into farming land. It went into gardens. So it didn't kill the streetscape, except for the part where it took down the original inn, which was on the street. So what I'm trying to say here is that this is, to say it's the last remaining, it shouldn't be to discount it. It should be to say, this is how we interpret how our town, how our village evolved. And this is the last remaining farmhouse that tells us this story. And I think that is very important to our historic village. As far as, let's see, on the nature of the historic, I know Scott said, well, there's nothing fancy about these houses. There's nothing outstanding. But that's the point. They're intact to their origins of people living in the village. I mean, you can ask people in the town. They went to a dentist at the beach house. There's multiple names people refer to. It's the Smith house. It's the Martin house. People know these families. George Perry, he had a team of oxen and he moved houses. He owned that house. So this is a real story. These houses are the real story of the village of Woodstock. They're not the fancy ones on the, that have their specific listing, like, on the register, in terms of, who lived there, or who slept there, or that kind of thing. This is a real house and tells a real story. And I also think there would be a huge void. When you take those down, I was trying to erase them. I tried it on a photo too, and it's like, it's a big hole. And then it's separating, there's no transition. There's no transition. The inn is nestled in the village, but you do that and the inn is separate from the village. You're creating a line of demarcation. And the argument that it's all surrounded by modern buildings, I don't follow. I see the other residences beyond this one, and this is the introduction to these residences. This is when you say, oh, and it's a neighborhood too. Isn't that lovely? I really think that the inn decided at some point, as they've said in their own words, they have no use for these buildings. Does that mean they should be demolished? I'm having a hard time weighing that. I mean, I think the expenses, we could meet in a year and the expenses would be all different again. I mean, it's a changing world. I don't think we can measure this on money spent. We have no idea what's going to be spent on the future expansion of the inn when it happens. It's not part of this discussion. It's probably who knows how much more than what these two houses need. So I really, my point is, I'm trying to establish what we would be losing by just demolishing these two houses. And I do think, never mind, even though the mitigation for precedence has been considered, I do think it creates a terrible precedence.
Okay.
Thank you for listening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We really like to move on. You have something
For criterion 8.
for criterion 8, you said?
Criterion 8, so I'll first cover aesthetics, scenic and natural beauty, and then I'll go to historic sites. Both under 8. Excuse my voice. I was attracted to this community in large part because of the significant and pervasive architectural beauty that Woodstock possesses. In 1999, my wife and I happened upon Woodstock on the way back from a late summer camping trip. We immediately fell in love with this quaint Vermont village. In many ways, it reminded us of the small villages we both grew up in. Mine in upstate New York Finger Lakes region, and hers in the mountains of Pennsylvania, not far from Altoona. And within 6 months, we became owners of a wonderful old home in the High Street neighborhood, in circa 1899. In many ways, the house reminded me of the 1870s Victorian I grew up in. The house needed a lot of work. Unfortunately, I was a building contractor and carpenter by trade. And more fortunately, my wife was an interior designer. And most fortunately, she was patient. And it became our labor of love, and a mere 7 years later, we moved 23 High Street, our full-time resident. And during this time and time since, our love for Woodstock has grown. And we appreciated the neighborhoods of historic homes and never grew tired of our daily walks through the village. We were amazed at how every walk seemed to be unique, and we were inspired by others and by other homes we saw. And we wanted to contribute to the beauty and character of Woodstock and by improving and preserving our own home. And we continued to work on the exterior of our home, restoring and maintaining its unique character. And we added gardens and improved the driveway with natural material. And we were motivated by the other homes in our village. And with our improvements, we saw a sort of renaissance happen on the entire street, and with many others probably doing the same thing. And we jokingly called our circa 1899 house the new house on the block. We are proud that our house and many others on High Street are listed on the National Historic Register. And by allowing the demolition of these two homes and leaving the site vacant, save a few trees, it affects my enjoyment of my neighborhood, my community, and affects my quality of life. And it is not complementary to the existing streetscape. It is not a positive contribution to the beauty of our village. I will refer to our town plan because it so eloquently expresses my own feelings. In the scenic statement section in our town plan, it states, the values we seek to protect, clearly aesthetic, but they are vitally important to both pleasure of living here and to the economic health of the community. I am here today to try to preserve the wonderful character and quality I have found in the village of Woodstock. And this is unique to New England and cannot be found anywhere else in the world. It is expressed in our homes, in our buildings, and in the fabric of our life. It is real. And when I walk through our village and take in my surroundings, I am warmed and nourished by what I see. And the architecture I see has a welcoming feel to it. I feel like I belong and I am truly home. I will fight to protect and preserve that as long as I am able. So regarding aesthetics, for historic sites, I'm sorry, for many of the same reasons as aesthetics, I value our historic sites and resources in Woodstock. I again refer to our town plan as it so well expresses my own views. On page 58, it states, for more than a century, Woodstock has been renowned as one of the most picturesque places in the United States. And it owes this well-deserved reputation to the way in which the natural and the built environment combined reinforces one another to produce a total environment that is both beautiful and characteristically New England. And Woodstock looks the way that the American mind thinks a New England town and village should look like. These characteristics have attracted people to Woodstock and have motivated Woodstock residents to preserve and to cultivate the beauty of their natural and built environment. And I visited Celebration, Disney Village built in the 1990s in Florida, attempting to recreate a historic feel and time period. And the homes were well built, they just did not have the authenticity you find in Woodstock. And the skills and knowledge of the craftsmen and tradesmen that built our houses here in Woodstock well over 100 years ago is nearly impossible to find in this day and age. With the demolition of each and every home comes an irretrievable degradation of our historic resources. The applicant's proposed green space would contribute absolutely nothing to our historic resources. It would merely serve as a placeholder for some undetermined development in the future. And according to the 106 Associates report, it specifically states the applicant is planning on building approximately 38 additional guest rooms on that proposed green space. And if the existing buildings are allowed to be demolished before those architectural plans for the new building are created and presented, the applicant is losing their best opportunity to demonstrate a true mitigation of the loss of those historic resources. And the commission is being denied their ability to make an informed determination of the overall impact of the current application on those resources. And the commission should not be asked to consider one without the other. And the applicant has made a very complete case to support the demolition of the two homes, and I do understand their predicament. And knowing Lawrence and Mary Rockefeller's love for history and attention to the aesthetics in our village, I believe the Woodstock Resort Board would truly rather save these two homes than demolish and dispose of them in a landfill. And there are multiple locations that these homes could be moved. to that I don't believe have been explored. So I believe these homes could be preserved if the Woodstock Resort Corp had the will to do it. And they do have the means to do it. I have, some maps here. And I guess we'll give one over to. Here for you.
Oh, these are proposed location. Did you get a copy?
Nope.
But
That's
can you-
okay. I mean,
Okay, would you like one, sir?
do you have an extra one, I guess?
I think we do. Yep, there you go. Thanks,
And the other one?
and we'll share.
No, there's another.
Oh, they're two different exhibits, sorry. Split them up.
This was the only.
Sorry.
You have it still.
I thought it was
There it is.
numerous.
I thought I saw another paper
All
clip.
right.
Okay.
All right, so I got. All right, can someone share it on?
You can share.
We can share. Suzanne, and Peter and I will share.
The key.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. Okay. These maps refer to, sir, these maps refer to what part of your,
So, start with the 14 South Street at the top, the darker one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call that, site A. So it's a bit of a squeeze, but there is enough room on the south side of 26 South Street, next to Vale Field, for 14 South Street to fit. There's enough room in between 24 South Street and 26 South Street for 16 South Street, minus the garage to fit. And there would be minimal impacts on street trees and few overhead wires as an obstacle. And these are all, Woodstock Resort Corp properties.
I got a question for you. What is the setback in the Woodstock Village for building?
I would assume that one would be able to get a variance because of the situation of the houses that would be going next to.
It's been reduced because of Act 47.
What is it? Do you know what it is
30, which setback from where to
in
where?
the village area zone? What is the
From the
setback?
street,
From building to building,
from the property line, yeah.
for the property line, or property line is probably the best way to say it. 15 feet?
So you're saying
Yes.
between the houses,
No, from the property line.
It's measured from.
the front setback or the side?
Side set.
Okay, side setbacks, I believe you also would be able to get a variance because there are many homes in the community that are very close. For example, my house on High
Those are,
Street.
those are existing houses that were put in before any zoning regulations.
There's
Yeah,
it's
so,
a strong.
That's what
Okay.
your answer is about.
all right. Okay,
'Cause I only have 3 feet between my house and my neighbor's.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so the space to work in for the 16 South Street relocation would be limited. The moving contractor would have to determine the feasibility. There may have to be some access to Vale Field for the 16 South Street relocation, and I'm sure our municipality would work with the applicant on that. And at these two locations, the two homes could then be renovated on the interior to provide additional housing and for their employees, which the Woodstock Resort Corp and Ben and I had this conversation, has stated that they are pursuing at this point. And the Woodstock Resort Corp would accomplish two of their goals, freeing up the 2 lots for future expansion of the inn and adding to their inventory of employee housing. And so that would be site A. And then on the second sheet,
Which is this sheet, is that
right,
correct?
yep.
Let's talk about
So
this.
basically I was, trying to find sites that were contiguous to the historic, district. Because I was going on what Laura had said, that the houses could be designated as historic if they were still within that district or contiguous to it. So, site, I marked those as site B and C. And site B is further south on the eastern side of South Street and at the northern end of the parking lot of the Woodstock Country Club. The building or buildings could be adapted to an alternative use at this site, perhaps for equipment storage or office space for the ground staff. And site C is the location that Ben had mentioned. And at the end, I have marked it on there, at the end of Maple Street, also owned by the Woodstock Resort Corp. And that, we never saw any hard, costs or anything on that, so we don't even know if it's really feasible. Although I believe Scott said that the movers, at least one mover said that they wouldn't even consider the project. Perhaps someone else would. But it is more challenging because of overhead wires and street trees along the way. Again, we have no hard costs and we have no real studies on the feasibility of moving these homes. And I think that would be prudent to have that. Okay. Undoubtedly, moving these buildings would come with a cost. And with these two homes on the historic register would then be preserved for many more years to come and live on in history. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Are we doing on 8?
8.
Other testimony, arguments on 8? Yeah.
Is it something new? Is it new?
Yes, because
okay.
it affects the, yes, it has the previous testimony, wanted to comment on it. So the Division of Historic Preservation uses 4.121 to define undue adverse effect. I'm sorry, I'm gonna move because the light is
Sure.
right in my eye. And for a historic site, the division's review purposes and adverse effect is that is not appropriately mitigated or reasonably avoided. The division considers these 4 factors in the determination. And speakers earlier this afternoon, I think, mentioned them briefly. Failure of the applicant to take generally available mitigating steps, which a reasonable person would take to preserve the character of the historic site. My opinion, to this point, the inn only looked at its reuse with limited residential use for their occupants. And they had very high costs. I think that there's a lot of need for housing in the village, both in staff and others. And I think that was not a fully explored topic. Structures for relocation or removal, 3 weeks in the summer in a local paper. Yeah, it's great that it wanted to stay in the district, but if the houses could be saved by moving them to Queechee or New York State, I'd say that's a far better answer than simply removing them. Interference of the project with the ability of the public to interpret or appreciate the historic qualities of the site. As other speakers have said, demolition of these 2 19th century vernacular residences that form the edge of the historic district would irreversibly affect the existing South Street, south-facing view shed, as well as the view sheds of the historic houses on the west side of the street. I think we heard from 1 or 2 residents today. And then the cumulative effects on the historic qualities of the site by the various components of a proposed project, which when taken together are so significant that they create an unacceptable impact. My feeling is these properties exhibit characteristics of the village landscape that features front and side lawns, plus two-story rectangular massing, clapboard siding, steeply sloping roofs, mature trees, and random foundational plantings. As proposed by the applicant, a broad open space, as we discussed before, resulting from the removal of 16 and 14 would be completely inconsistent with the adjacent neighborhood. Removal of these two structures would constitute a visible void in the historic district streetscape. And finally, violation of a clear written community standard, which is intended to preserve the historic qualities of the site. Fortunately for Woodstock, we have a standard that this violates. Unfortunately, the policymakers in secret deliberation voted 3-2 to accept the demolition. But if you look at 405A, statement of character, as well as 405G, demolition of buildings and site, you will see what I'm talking about. This project clearly doesn't meet those criteria. And remember, in our local ordinance, which is in place now, not the one that's being drafted and proposed, they have to meet all 5 criteria. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So,
Separate point.
separate point, okay.
So, my point is about, the void and the role that these houses are currently playing in their set location, in their historic location. When those houses are removed and some trees are planted, I would argue that your events and your, noise concerns will spread throughout the neighborhood. I would argue that these two houses are actually performing a marvelous function in terms of a screen to the events that are happening on the interior. You know, as much as the point you made, it's not ideal for a resident and you want to control who's in that house. Employee housing would certainly be appropriate and would also continue this buffer, visual buffer and sound buffer in as it is. I think that one letter to the editor said, well, what's going to happen next? You know, people are going to complain. There's going to be a fence, and then it's going to have to be how high is the fence, and then there's going to have to be all these other mitigation that aren't being anticipated. So I just wanted to add that point to the loss and the void that this demolition will create, or would. I don't want to say will because it's not would create.
Okay.
And in my packet went for party status is the photo that I took that is the view walking straight down South Street. The first thing my eye goes to is 16 South. And it says residential neighborhood. Nice. And you almost don't even notice that there's this very, very large tavern next to you because you're looking forward to these roof lines. And 16 South is the primary because it's frontal to the streetscape. And of course, the snow is highlighting it right now, but it would be the roof. So that's the visual streetscape point that I'm making that would be lost. So it's in the packet.
Yeah, Peter has that, correct, Peter?
Yeah.
So I can
We'll
keep
go
mine.
with that.
You don't need another.
No, I think
Okay.
just Peter having it. would be
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Anything else on 8?
beg your pardon?
Anything else on 8?
Yes. Okay,
I mean, I will just make just a quick couple
Is that
comments.
okay? I'm sorry.
oh, sure.
Yeah, a couple comments on the issues that were brought up. I think relocation, I appreciate the exercise of going through it. You know, the comment about these homes have a side yard and front yard. Those first kind of 2 locations is a tight squeeze. That's a very, I would say, not congruous streetscape by putting those 2 homes in between those 2 homes. There is a reality that takes up parking spots that is a needed for the residents of those houses, and you know, taking up parking for moving the houses just creates a.
I would like to comment on that. like, before we get it moved on. to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
let him
Just
finish.
about that specific site though, before he moves on to anything else.
Well, what's that, Peter? I think that, if you could keep your thought, we'll let him continue, and then you can address your idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just think that those locations wouldn't be unacceptable just because of the incongruity of the spacing of buildings, the assumption of being able to get land that's not ours, to make it feasible through the town, taking up, current uses of the house next to those buildings is used as a guest house. So while 3 feet between houses might work in a certain context, in this location, it would not be feasible to have those be looked at as very useful buildings being that tight. The site that is site C, that is the site that we were investigating. That was the one that was the most logical for us to move. We had some investigations and I put in a jurisdiction opinion about developing that site in some capacity. We did have a wetland analysis that proved that most of that site is unbuildable because of wetland survey that we did. So, and in its current status, the way regulations are, we would not be able to move that site to that location. And then just to quickly refer to, site B on the Woodstock Country Club, is definitely looking at the availability of land down there around the country club is definitely just taking a house and kind of plopping it out of context, completely out of scale with the surrounding environment. Appreciate the thought of going into where could these buildings move on resort property, but I don't think any of those are reasonably feasible. And I know there's an issue about the noise that kind of goes into the next criteria. Understand that the houses provide a certain screening function for noise. Our town has an ordinance of a decibel rating at the property line. The property line doesn't get any closer by removing those 2 homes. The closest that is measured is on Cross Street. So we do go through the process of monitoring our sites to make sure that we are in accordance with that ordinance. And there wouldn't be any difference in that measurement or the nearness of that measurement wouldn't happen any closer if those 2 buildings were removed. And also just want to put out there, in my outline was to mention that I'm on the planning commission. I put out there that I'm on the planning commission to show that of my continued involvement in the community. There's no conflict of interest. I had no part of drafting the current village development review board regulations. I had no process in applying those regulations. But there's an interest in to relitigate those that zoning ordinance, but it did go through the process. And there was testimony that those people felt that we hit all those criteria.
Okay,
It's not going through.
thank you. Thank you for your patience. You may.
Okay, so in regard to site A, I was not saying to take property from this municipality. I was saying to utilize it during the move. Would be no taking of property. Okay, so to clear that up. As far as parking, I do realize there is parking in the locations that I'm proposing. But I also see behind those buildings, there's more than adequate space and access for parking behind all those buildings. So you would not be losing any parking, you would just have to relocate the parking, which I think is much less important than preserving historic buildings. And as far as how close the buildings are, I do understand it's close. I did measure it out. It will fit. Whether it's feasible for a mover to do it, I believe it is. I think they do some pretty amazing things about moving buildings. And many of the buildings in our historic district, including on my street, are very close together. And there's a house across the street. The painter can't even get in between the 2 houses to paint. So I don't think it would be unusual to see that in a historic context. As far as the site B, Country Club, I beg to differ that those buildings would be out of context. And granted, on that side of the street, you have the Gulf across the street, and you have a whole line of historic homes. It's all part of the historic district.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be out of context. I think it would fit actually, and you could utilize the houses for, as I said, for another use.
Okay, what we need to remember is that we are talking about what has been presented to us today by the applicant, and listen to you in regards to that application. So if there's nothing else with criteria A8, is it a new?
Yes, it's part of my packet that I wanted to share in testimony. It's in the packet I gave,
How does that?
Peter, and their photos.
Okay,
I guess I didn't understand the speaking times clearly enough to be organized better. Sorry, I apologize. But what I wanted to share with you that's in my packet is that, this is 16 South in 1940. This is courtesy of the Historic Center in 1946. And this is the same 16 in 1968. And this, I'm just gonna go back to 46. You'll see the other house that's no longer there that is now under the tavern. But this was the neighborhood. Back to Jenna's original question, what was there? You can see the edge of the other original house. But this is already over 100 years after it was built. And then this is a 1968 photo. And this is a 1999 photo when the inn acquired the property. So I included these photos for your consideration because it shows the integrity of these homes, that they stayed pretty much the same, which is valuable when you're on the historic register. That's the integrity is a big pivotal piece of how it informs the public. So I wanted to, and they're in the packet, but I just wanted to make it a known part of my presentation. Thank you.
Before we move on, we probably should ask, Greg from Historic Preservation if he has anything he wants to add, or anyone online.
Is he still there?
Yeah, I am still here. No, I think I said my piece in my comment letter, which I'm sure some of you, if you haven't read it yet, you'll be able to read. And I think there's been a lot of robust conversation about the demolition of these buildings. So I don't think I have anything further to add at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna ask Peter to go back into our other criteria that we're going to consider. We do have, what is your comment?
Who's speaking?
Greg Sissons.
Right. So can I ask him a question?
Are you still there, Greg?
Yep,
You
I'm
got
still
a
here.
question?
Sure.
Okay. Speak up because it's coming to here.
Okay, I would like to ask, if a house is moved, then how does it get to be designated as a contributed resource?
There would need to be an amendment to the existing Woodstock Village Historic District. Looking at that building, having been moved in its new context, and it would take the relocation into consideration and basically reassess that building within its new context within the existing historic district. So it'd be similar to what's proposed in our one of our mitigation items, which would be a reassessment of or an amendment to the Woodstock Village Historic District. which would reflect the removal of these buildings. It would be a similar process that would have to be approved by us and also the National Park Service at the federal level. That's not to say
So it sounds like-
they will be contributing, but they may be.
Right, but it's not something that would be insurmountable, so it wouldn't basically throw out the whole idea of relocating the houses because they could no longer become a contributory resource.
Yeah, and I stated this in our comment letter. We're very supportive of relocating the houses, regardless of their contributing status at the end of the relocation. Them retaining their historic significance is not necessary for us to be supportive of saving the houses through relocation.
Certainly is possible, right?
Excuse me, sorry.
It certainly is possible.
Is it possible to relocate them?
Oh, is it possible to redesignate them?
Oh,
as an historic
it is possible. Yes, it is possible.
Thank you.
Okay.
Greg, Philip Newberg, Chair of the Village CLG. We wrote to your office on September 30th, 2025.
Whose
Yes.
office are you talking?
Greg's office.
Greg's.
Greg's
Oh,
office.
Greg, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were addressing him. Okay.
Yes, I'm happy to submit it if you wish. We heard no response from you in nearly 2 months. I think that's A, discourteous, and B, an abrogation of your responsibility to us as a certified local government.
Okay.
So the items that are in here are things that we saw.
No, this is not the time. This is not the time. If you want to take this up with Greg later, you may.
Well, I'd like to know if this is entered into your record, our formal.
You will have an opportunity to enter things into the record in the recess period.
Perhaps
after the-
Greg can answer.
I think we should move on. And like Peter said, that this is something that you can take up with Greg. If you would, please. Okay, think we're ready to move on? So, Peter? Okay. Let's go, we did criteria 8 because we knew it would have most participation. We appreciate you accommodating that. Let's go back. What do you think, Peter, in the order of number 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Rich?
Let's can we wrap this up today?
I really don't think there's much left, and I think the remaining criteria, which I understand to be issues with air, dust in the air from construction, issues with water during construction, things running into the waterway, and traffic via construction. I think we can address them as part of construction, right? I mean, they're impacts from construction activities. So if you wanted us to, I think the 2 gentlemen that are up here right now can speak to all 3 at the same time. If you would like to go one by one, we can do that. So it's really up to you. But I certainly think we're close. Obviously 8 was the big one, and we can submit responses to the other criteria as well as part of the recess memo, if that'd be helpful. But I think it'd be, since we have these folks here, they could speak to it.
Okay. Peter, would you help me with addressing what the criteria are so that we can speak to those?
Yep, it's 1 as it relates to, so criterion 1 as it relates to noise, and dust and waste disposal. And also with respect, that's all 1. And then it's, waste disposal is 1, remind me, waste disposal is 1D, and then streams is.
I think they wanted 1 air pollution, 1 water pollution.
Yeah.
And then 1 as it related to noise.
Noise,
and then
which is
5
5.
for traffic.
And streams, maybe.
streams was in relationship to the water pollution, so.
So, yeah,
Okay,
I think that makes sense to group the three of them and then take arguments and comments.
Is it possible just to submit this in writing? Well,
Well, yes,
if you
what time is it?
but we can-
send in what
we can
I-
probably wrap it up. And we will have an opportunity, again, for people to submit things that were not included, that we didn't get to. But if we can get to it, let's get to it. Let's do it.
Mhm. Okay,
Perfect. First with waste disposal. So, you know, Kathleen Taft is on. She connected us with Brian Sales to submit a construction waste disposal plan as in accordance with Act 250, which is required for buildings over 5,000 square feet. Our combined square footage is like 5,200 square feet, including porches in the garage. So we submitted that plan. I talked with Brian last week, reformatted to a new template they had, and he expects their approval of our waste management plan this week. Included in that plan is the acknowledgement that all hazardous material asbestos is remediated before any deconstruction happens. So that should alleviate any concern. We have the analysis and reports of what is asbestos in there. All that beautiful linoleum flooring is asbestos. And we go through the process to make sure that it gets signed off done by licensed contractors. In 2019, they had 3 quotes for asbestos remediation, and I would pick a licensed contractor to do that. The impact of the actual demolition, we did get demolition quotes, and I put myself as the managing person of the project, and so again, any issues with potential conflicts of interest with traffic, with noise, we did put on there that we were restricting our demolition between 9 and 5. There shouldn't be any noise issues outside of the normal work week, and are very receptive and responsible in connecting with neighbors about issues to make sure that we're addressing needs with traffic patterns, with school pickups, with dust control. We'll be working with the contractor to make sure that they're employing methods to limit dust control, which is a common practice in demolition of spraying down the structure and keeping it wet so that it contains the dust of the site. And would make sure that we are being a good partner and not having traffic or congestion doing school pickup and drop off times so that the traffic would not be affected. Just like any construction project, there's a period of where trucks are having to go through. There's delays because of traffic. This is a very small timeline in the grand scheme of things. We would talk with the demolition company and make sure that they're following proper protocol. They're professionals. If they don't go on roads that they're not supposed to, they'll be making a point of actually pointing out that they shouldn't be going on High Street. And very confident that we alleviate any issues beforehand. And if anything came up, I'm the one responsible on site.
so you would put all that into an offer, a bid solicitation?
Yes, yep.
And when you get the bids back, you'd evaluate all those
Correct,
to make sure that they follow those
yes,
processes?
absolutely.
Okay.
And 5 was congestion. So did I wrap that up?
Any consideration for the school?
Yeah, the school, again, we really try to make sure that we're not doing it during school where they're picking up and dropping off. So finding a time where that is not impactful for the school is also a priority for us. So, we'll have to work on scheduling about when they're not occupied or when there is an activity at the school to make sure that we're not impacting them and, people aren't at the playground, even though we're doing the proper measures to contain everything, just to alleviate any concerns about any issues that people would have.
Okay.
And just, Ben, thank you. That's helpful. Steve, since you have some letters after your name that pertain to this, I mean, in your, of course, your professional duties, do you deal with construction and demolition activities? And can you just sort of, I don't know, confirm the things that Ben said about, dealing with dust, dealing with, discharge into waters, and perhaps traffic to the extent you can speak to it? Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of demolition, most projects involve some. And, the noise is, subjective, but the big diesel equipment, it goes very quickly. Abatement has to be done in advance. They do air testing to confirm the buildings are clean. And then those results are submitted, and typically controlling dust, it doesn't produce water other than you miss the technique I see most often is they'll miss the buildings as they're pulling them down to prevent the clouds of dust. And that's common. They do demolition right next to hospitals, and in hospitals, there are clean ways to do it. Better, it's inevitable. There's some noise and dust, but it's quick. And I think 2 weeks seems reasonable time frame. Probably less than a day to actually get the buildings down and mostly away per building, but. And there, luckily in Vermont, there's a lot of recycling. I'm sure you addressed that in your construction waste plan.
Yeah, we are, reached out to people who can salvage metals from the site, potentially salvage architectural features of many things. It's pretty much lead paint everywhere, so how much is actually of value that somebody will want to take out is questionable. But radiators, copper piping, the roofing, the contractor when they demolish the building, any hard materials like concrete or the stone or the asphalt, they can take to their own processing plant, crush it down and repurpose it and reuse it. So there's value in that. When they're taking down the buildings, they also kind of extract any metal that's left over. All the flashing for the roofs is copper, so they'll harvest the copper out and recycle that in any metal that they can take out as well. So.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
A question for Ben. How would the lead paint part be handled? When it's, like, I did notice it's the entire front porch. Looks like lead paint.
Yeah, that's the misting. You don't remediate the lead paint before deconstruction, you just control the dust. Yep.
But it can go in the landfill?
It can go in the landfill,
Mhm.
depending on the level of the lead. I think it just goes to the general landfill, or maybe it has to be a line landfill. It depends on the intensity of the lead.
Okay, so if you said that earlier, I missed it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Has there been any testing of the plaster, particularly in the beach house, for asbestos? And because it was typically added to plaster.
Yeah, it can be found in plaster, and I haven't looked at that report in 8-9 years, so I don't know. But we do have the report. I think it's part of the record, and.
Yeah, because the concern with asbestos is when it's friable.
Yep.
And it goes airborne.
Yep, I
So
understand.
during demolition, obviously, when that plaster comes down, it creates a lot.
All the asbestos would be removed before the demolition starts.
So
If the plaster contains asbestos, it'll all be removed legally, disposed of legally, tested before demo can begin. All the known asbestos will be removed before demolition.
And there'll be documentation of that,
Yep.
testing and all.
It's a state and federal requirement.
Yep.
And that falls to the abatement contractor, but they're used to it. They submit the test results and everything, and before the demo can proceed, they got to get a blessing. Yep.
So I do have further, if we're finished.
Are you gentlemen finished with those
Are there any
points?
questions from the commission on those criteria?
No, I just had that one question about, bid solicitation. Make sure that's clearly stated on.
That's
the
pretty
requirements.
common,
Yes.
that's the spec, and here's all the requirements.
Right.
Yeah,
Every one of those is standard. So,
yes, yes, sir. Okay, yes, sir.
And so as far as, the air pollution, potential air pollution we were just talking about. And so it's pretty much established that the lead, asbestos, and in the 106 report, said also mold hazards, have been established. So, is there anything that they need to do for mold?
They have to abate it. It depends on the type of mold. And some are dangerous, some not so much. So the dangerous ones have to be abated at the same time or in conjunction with the asbestos, all before demolition starts.
And all this will be documented as far as
Yep.
testing and.
Yep, clean air testing is required.
We'll have access to all that documentation.
Sure, yeah.
So basically, I mean, we've established that there's a potential issue with the elementary school and the playground as far as dust is concerned. So what I would like to see is conditions from the commission. And the following, I believe, should be considered if the demolition is approved. A limitation to the time of year demolition can occur. For example, when school is not in session or low season of tourism. And detouring of vehicle and pedestrian traffic during active demolition. And so there's no carry out of potential pollution on cars, people walking, on people's clothing. Proper covering of debris during hauling, and which is pretty much the law, but we know it happens often. And before and after testing for hazardous contaminants on site and adjacent properties, not just on the site. I know you said they're gonna do it on the site. And will they establish any benchmarks, like say a playground in the elementary school, any of the surrounding facilities? And again, guest rooms even. Is that something they will do for testing?
I've never seen that done, but I don't know what the risks are.
Because how would we know if something gets contaminated and needs a cleanup if we don't have a prior level recorded? Real-time air testing and continuous monitoring during demolition on the site and on adjacent properties. Will there be real-time testing?
I've never seen that done, no.
I've never seen that. Okay. I have. A requirement for any necessary cleanup to restore any affected properties, including the site, to pre-demolition conditions. That's what I have for air. As far as noise, we all agree that it's going to generate a lot of noise.
I don't think I said it was gonna generate, so I certainly don't agree with you. I mean, the big excavators, which is how these are gonna be demolished, are quiet. The abatement process is quiet. You know, it's,
Well, you did say it was subjective.
yeah.
So
But in my
the way
view, it's not gonna dominate.
The way I hear it, probably the way the children in the elementary school would hear it, would be pretty damn loud.
Yeah, maybe.
Demolition is noisy business, particularly when using heavy machinery and when loading dump trucks and dumpsters. I mean, they're not gonna be placing the stuff gently in the trucks. And the immediate neighborhood will be affected. And if High Street is used as a main thoroughfare, and I think Ben has said that's not gonna be allowed to happen, and I do appreciate that. And I appreciate his proactiveness on monitoring everything on the site, communication with the neighbors as well. And but if High Street is used as a main thoroughfare, and I've dealt with this before, for either ingress or egress for the construction or hauling equipment, dump trucks, whatnot, and the vibrations and noise will affect me inside my house due to its close proximity to the roadway. I'm basically 10 feet from the curb. And High Street is a high-density neighborhood. Many houses would be similarly affected because they're similarly situated. So that's my concern about noise. And water is pretty simple to deal with, but again, I really think that the commission should put conditions to make sure that these are codified and that these are adhered to. There's 3 storm drains right next to the of the site. And I mentioned before, and these should be protected and monitored to ensure there are no contaminants from the demolition that will enter our storm drainage system and end up in the Peter Brook 375 feet away. And at point of disposal, care should be taken that hazardous materials from the demolition do not contaminate storm runoff or nearby streams. And that's it for one. Thank you.
Okay. So, anything,
We never did ask for 5 or 8, or for 8, but also for this, if there were other people who were online who had questions or comments.
that's a good point. That's true.
So this would be a good time.
And also, Kathleen is on, if you wanted to allow her a chance to present her comments.
I don't think she's planning to.
Okay.
Yeah, Kathleen, if you were planning to say anything about your comments, or if anyone online had questions or comments, I apologize that we didn't include you at the end of criterion 5. But now would be the opportunity to do that. We're getting close to wrapping up.
Yeah.
So if you're interested, please raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up. So we'll leave a little time for awkward silences. That can take a minute.
And we're still gonna cover 5.
Oh, you know what? I haven't allowed them to unmute themselves.
Okay.
Okay, let me
We're
do
gonna
that.
have another minute to allow people to unmute themselves.
Okay.
I'm okay. Hi. I defer to my written comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any responses to the written comments from A&R? It was 1D, which you haven't discussed yet, which is all,
Yeah,
and 1B.
I thought they were, but I do that to my client.
Ask that again. Is there,
Do you want me to bring the comments up?
from Kathleen Tapp?
Uh-huh.
You can, I can respond to them. She wants the approval of the construction waste management plan, approved. Which again, I think she said it dated December 30th. Again, we're expecting that this week. And then the other thing was that both buildings are in the flood hazard area, so, I'm forgetting her name right now, Asa, from that office, wanted to make sure that there was a licensed engineer who would, attest to and document that there was no change in flood storage capacity. So, we are working with an engineer who's going to generate that letter. He has next to PASA just to make sure that they're hitting the right marks. And we're hopefully going to have that letter this week as well. But she, I think, yeah, said December 30th. We'll have both of those things satisfied.
Okay.
Robert said he didn't finish with 5.
Number 5?
Number 5.
Anybody? Okay, we'll
I thought we had talked about 5. With
I have-
construction. I thought you had, because you were talking about trucks by your house.
No,
Okay,
that
good.
was- That was about noise.
Okay.
Trucks make noise.
okay,
All right, so it's pretty quick.
okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, regarding transportation, although limited in duration, trucking operations may create unsafe traffic conditions. And both Cross Street and High Street are narrow streets, choked down to one lane with parking allowed on one side, which doesn't allow for safe passage of large vehicles. A 16,000-pound restriction also is in place on High Street. And there are many children that I personally know that live in our neighborhood on High Street that should be protected from unsafe traffic conditions as well. And trucking traffic should be limited to highway routes, namely Route 106 and Route 4 in the village. Thank you.
Okay, I haven't heard anything in your regards to the truck on the site and so on. I haven't heard mention, but have you folks considered about having flaggers or people out there to allow trucks to back up and so on properly and proceed properly
Yes.
onto the road?
Yeah, that
We
would be a
haven't heard
part
that
of,
mentioned.
yeah, the standard operating contract that would enter in to make sure that they're going onto Route 106 feasibly. I think there's there's quite a bit of traffic on High Street. It's a lot of it is used kind of people cutting back and forth. So it's not, the number of trips, I don't think is really a huge added, impact as far as how much traffic will be on the site just because of those. It'll just be, big trucks every so often. So,
Could you repeat that, please? I couldn't hear it.
yeah, I don't think the actual number of trips is gonna be so huge as a big impact versus what the actual traffic is on that site normally, right? In the morning and afternoon, there are, dozens and dozens of cars dropping off kids back and forth. So if this occurs on, when school's not happening, that traffic is gonna be much less than when school would be in session. So I think the impact is gonna be, quite minimal. And again, as we talked about, we're happy to keep all that construction, truck traffic, legally they have to stay off High Street, but we'll just make sure that's part of the condition. Yeah.
In addition to flaggers, this being the county seat and the sheriff's right around the corner, I'm sure there'll be police are involved. They're here all the time anyway, so that would be a particularized attention for them, I would think.
Yeah.
No, we don't see them very often on High Street.
Well, no, but coming down onto the other streets.
I know that Mr. Pear mentioned, limiting it to the time of year when there's possibly no school. Is that a consideration?
Yeah, absolutely. Had her concern, about traffic. Really, the concern that I got from the neighbor was more about traffic during pickup and drop off.
But if we don't have that, if we don't have pickup and drop off, it makes a
Yeah,
lot of people
they weren't,
safer.
they weren't necessarily concerned. My impression was they weren't necessarily concerned about traffic during the day when school was in session, was particularly when school was being pick up and drop off. But, we want to make sure that it's feasible for everybody. And, if it has to be on days that school's not in session, we can work through that.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. All right, we've done well.
I will say the comment about, when it's not busy tourism wise, often, when tourism is busy, often is when school is out. So, there might be a particular balance we have to find, of when, we can't do, Christmas week is, some of the busiest time of the year, February break, busiest time of the year, summer, busiest time of year. So like, we'll have to find a balance of, what time makes sense.
I think that's the right word, is find the balance somehow.
And in Woodstock, it's hard to find a time when tourism isn't busy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
And I was really referring to more like foliage.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, when we know.
What's stuff going on that have to deal with this? I mean, is this unusual?
No, I mean, Central Street had a house being constructed, and a restaurant being constructed, for the past year, right on Central Street. And they managed just fine. So, that project. There's, construction kind of going on all the time. So
Of course there is.
I think it'll be a pretty concentrated and not high impact.
So, okay. You have something, sir?
Well, Pete, did you want to talk about 3040 or I didn't understand that initial comment. I mean, I'm happy to stand on what I submitted unless the commission has questions on that. I stand by the point. We're not asking to amend a condition. We're just not. There's nothing. We want to leave it in there. In fact, we're asking to implement subsection C that expressly contemplates the demolition of these structures. So
yeah, I was thinking that Ben's initial comments about the entire process they went through to get to this point was sort of your argument.
Perfect.
For this, at least, in addition to what you filed. So yeah, if there's more you want to say about it, now's the time.
I'm done.
Okay.
I was expecting, but he covered so much.
Yeah.
Well, and that's,
Yeah.
it's sort of
So,
He did.
plan. Yeah, thank you for.
That prompts a procedural question I have about Act 250 mitigation requirements. So this application is tied to mitigation requirements set out by the board in 2009. And do you feel you have enough testimony to consider those four requirements? Four requirements in that permit.
We were talking about the four
19A through D.
19A through D.
Yes, whereby the upkeep, the reporting, the maintenance of interior and exterior, those expectations. So that was a condition, and it was given by this board and this permitting agency. So can you explain how that factors into your deliberations? And then the outcome of new mitigation and that enforcement cycle. Is my question coming across? So they matter. I guess, A, do they matter?
All right, let's,
Everything matters.
so let's back up. So, the Act 250 has case law and a rule for what are called, critical conditions. Conditions that, were, sort of effectively promises, that were made in order to get a permit previously. And one of the issues in this case was that a critical condition? If you haven't looked, you can see that the applicant filed a legal brief early last week, outlining their rationale, their arguments. Both, one was that it's not that it's not a critical condition, but that wasn't really a condition at all. And in the
Sorry,
no,
no.
yeah, go ahead.
It is clearly a condition, and whether or not it's critical, I address that, but the key issue is we're not asking to amend it. So
okay,
the Stowe Club Highlands analysis 34E only applies when an applicant comes to you and says, please change this condition. We're not asking you to do that because that condition expressly contemplates some future dealing with these buildings in the future, and might be rehabilitated, might be relocated, or it might be demolished. Well, that's exactly why we're before you. We're here in accordance with that permit and asking you to do what the 2009 commission told us to do, is when we had a future proposal, in this case demolition, we would come to you with a plan and ask you to abide by that condition. So no amendment of a condition is being requested here.
Got it. So I misspoke. I said it wasn't, I mischaracterized the argument, but you just stated it for you. And then the other part of his argument was, his argument is that even if it were a critical condition, and it was, they're not conceding the point, but if it is something that it meets the test laid out in Rule 34E, which is this is the Act 250 rule that sort of codifies this, what's called Stowe Club Highlands case, that said, what happens, basically allows for flexibility in the future. So if there's a critical condition and someone comes forward in the future, there's a test that you have to go through to explain why situations have changed, the rules have changed, the law has changed, something has changed, and that flexibility should outweigh that finality. And they've also made that argument. Okay. So that's where we are with respect to that. The commission has not made that determination. Basically, they've got that argument, and they are taking testimony. What I informed because with the way that they frame the argument is like a preliminary issue, and I said we're doing this whole thing today, so we want to hear the testimony on everything. We'll hear the legal arguments. The commission's going to do this recess period, give people an opportunity to provide more, a little bit more, and that will be explained in the recess order, exactly what the commission wants to see more of and what the timeframes are. And then the commission will make a decision as to all of it, including the commission's decision as to whether or not they agree with that analysis.
So the answer is yes, it will be factored in and weighed, that those mitigation conditions. And so moving forward, when a decision is made and there might be the acceptance of the mitigation proposals that are on the table that the inn is proposing, this decision, this permit would include those or not, approve them or not, as a new set of, as you call, promises to moving forward. I think you've explained my question.
I know it's
No, it's just I wanted to make sure it mattered. I'm sorry. My phone is off, but it's ringing in my hearing aids. Can you hear it?
No.
No, good. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thankfully, no.
So I just
Right.
wanted to understand that. It'll be done this side.
Okay,
Just
Thank
on
you.
the same topic, so if a permittee does not adhere to one of the conditions, isn't that essentially an amendment? Aren't they amending the
They are
permit
seeking,
on
right,
their own? So-
they're seeking an amendment to what
Well,
was
if
previously.
they're ignoring a condition, is that considered?
Well, they need to get an amendment to do what they want to do. So, whether it's building something new or demolishing the building would require an amendment. So they've come in and asked for that amendment.
I'm kind of asking about the preserve and maintain clause. So they didn't really adhere to that, and that's.
Didn't we just hear that there is no amendment, that you're?
We're seeking an amendment to the permit.
Mhm.
We are not asking the commission to amend a prior condition.
Their argument is that the prior condition expressly contemplated them coming forward and asking for this.
And this is not an enforcement proceeding, which I think a lot of people may not understand. But if there were to be an enforcement action, it would not be before this board, I don't think.
Right.
Although those rules have changed.
No, you're right. It would go straight to the environment court.
okay. Well, I think we've
Read the
talked a
last
lot about this, but I'm going to read it for the record. Okay, thank you all for your participation. The commission will reflect on all the evidence and testimony presented today. Next, the commission may issue a hearing recess that keeps the record open for the time. Typically, a hearing recess order asks the participants and sometimes other parties to submit supplemental information in response to the questions that have been raised today and allow parties an opportunity to respond to these supplemental filings. Once the process is complete, the commission will consider the record to be final. Once we have all the supplemental information that we need, we'll deliberate and issue our decision as expediently as possible. Want to thank everyone today. Everyone has a lot of compassion for that, we could tell. And I know that struck me from the applicant side to the neighbors, to the town's, the neighbor side. If there's no further comments, this hearing is now in recess.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Hey.
I don't see a.
No.
But